I want to know who these children are, how their parents were involved, and have we talked to those children now as adults?
When I wrote to the Kinsey Institute and I asked, what about these children? They just casually wrote me back. Gebhardt casually wrote me back that, well, we never had any follow-up on these children. It was too expensive, he said, or just impossible. What does he mean there's never been a follow-up? You just talked about men who are raping children, at least 317 children. Now we're looking at, it comes up to maybe 2,035 at minimum, probably. The youngest 2 months of age, and you call yourselves, quote-unquote, scientists, and you've never even followed up. That's a lie. There's got to be some information, and if it was good information, if they had found out that these children were completely unharmed, lived fine lives, we would know about it. They would have passed that information on to us so fast.
Many of the children abused by Kinsey's pedophiles probably had no idea that they were part of a government-sponsored study. Most likely living out their lives in suffering and confusion about what had happened to them. But when the Family Research Council released its documentary, The Children of Table 34, the haunting image of a stopwatch sparked the memory of a woman who calls herself Esther White.
My grandfather molested me when I was around 4. And he never did again. But he went to Indiana University to get his teaching certificate. And he took biology while he was there. And so I'm assuming that he probably met Kinsey there because the whole university was involved in his research.
As a child, Esther says she was taken by her father and grandfather to meet with Alfred Kinsey. But the real purpose of the meeting would be a mystery for years to come.
I didn't really know. I didn't connect it all until I read Judith Reisman's writings. Especially when it came to the video that she did where they showed a stopwatch. And that was the key. I realized, yes, that was what was going on.
Now in her 70s, her desire is to remain as anonymous as possible, out of consideration for her family. Esther White is her assumed name.
How old were you when you met Dr. Alfred Kinsey?
It was probably in 1943 or so, 43 or 44. I was born in 34. My father was very excited about taking me there to meet Dr. Kinsey. I didn't know who he was. All I knew was that my dad was very excited about taking me there for an interview. And he was instructing me that I was to be very nice to this man and answer him. He told me they would ask me about my family and whether I loved my family and so forth. So when we got there, it was at my grandfather's and great-grandmother's house. And Mr. Kinsey and his 2 colleagues were late in getting there because it was winter time. And he was doing a seminar at Ohio State University. This was in Columbus, Ohio. And when he came, he was in very much of a rush because they were so late. And he kneeled down in front of me and asked me questions about whether I loved my daddy, whether I loved my family. And of course I said yes, because I did. I loved my family. And the interview was very short. There was a man with him that had a clipboard who was taking down my answers to the questions. I can't remember all the questions he asked, but it was probably a 5 or 10 minute interview. And just before they left, my grandfather said, "What about the check?" And he says, "Oh yes, I almost forgot."
Who said that, Kinsey?
Kinsey said that. And so my grandfather took a check from him, and Kinsey said, "I made it out to both of you because I didn't know which one was going to get the money."
The disturbing implication is that Alfred Kinsey used taxpayer money via the Rockefeller Foundation to finance pedophiles who were actively molesting children.
Why would he pay them? For what?
At the time, I didn't know for what. Many years later, I found out that my dad had actually helped Alfred Kinsey do research for his book.
Esther's own father had been molesting her for years and sending information to the Kinsey Institute. When Kinsey's book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, was released, her father showed her a copy and boasted that he had helped to write it. At the time, she did not know what he meant.
He gave me a copy of the book in 1947, but it was a pre-edition signed by somebody, autographed by somebody, and I don't remember who, but my father gave me the book and said that he helped Alfred Kinsey research on the book, and they're going to change the way the world looked at sexuality.
How old were you when your father first began to molest you?
I was probably around 6, maybe 7. I couldn't tell you exactly.
Do you ever remember your father molesting you with a stopwatch?
Yes.
And then would he record information?
There were papers on the dresser, and I saw one of the papers one day, and it had a lot of questions on it. And there were little boxes to check those things off when those things were done. And it was talking about orgasm. I didn't know what that word meant, but at the time. And when I asked him what that word meant, when I saw it on the paper, he grabbed the paper, put it in a brown envelope, and he said that he was late in sending this in. And he put it in this big brown envelope.
Esther's revealing testimony confirms Paul Gephardt's statement that Kinsey